Why is this bee so fierce, upgrading its stinger at any cost to go straight for the duck? Just how big is this grudge? Just moments ago, while other bees were still using the old method to collect nectar, this bee had quietly upgraded its collection technique, and these flowers were carefully cultivated by the duck. While watering the plants, the duck saw a little bee stumbling along, because it was carrying too much. It was exhausted and dripping with sweat. Seeing this, the duck dipped a finger and tasted it. The bee was unhappy but couldn't fight back, so it could only endure. This only earned it a round of mocking laughter from the duck. At that moment, the duck suddenly realized if there's a bee collecting nectar, there must be a beehive nearby. If he could get the honey from the hive to mix with water, how refreshing that would be. The duck immediately set out to find the beehive. Even after the bee had made its second trip, the duck came up empty-handed. He had no choice but to return to the flower bed. At that time, the bee was carrying honey, ready to go home. Seeing the duck upset, it simply threw away the stolen nectar, acted like nothing happened, and walked off whistling. But it didn't know that Donald Duck had his eye on its nest. To create a diversion, the bee even changed its outfit. The moment the duck lifted the skirt, he immediately saw the nectar. The scene became very awkward. The duck frantically explained. Seeing how sincere he was, the bee turned and walked away. The duck didn't give up. He laid out an ink pad on the ground. Sure enough, the bee, carrying nectar, jumped off the table and left a trail of footprints. The duck followed the footprints all the way, but before long, the footprints suddenly formed a circle. It turned out the bee had already seen through his trick and walked on stilts instead. The duck upgraded his tactics again. He cut a sticky board into the shape of a flower and tied it to a fishing line, planning to fish for the bee. Sure enough, the unsuspecting bee stepped on the sticky board and walked outside. The duck followed the fishing line all the way to the yard. He excitedly climbed the tree, but once again, the bee saw through it. The bee pulled out a small chainsaw, cut the branch, hid the bait in a trap, and flew away to watch the show. The next second, the duck fell for it. On the other side, the duck's mindset completely collapsed. He even got tricked by the butter on a tractor, and that was the honey. The duck immediately grabbed a bottle and caught all the nectar cleanly. When the bee returned, it specifically checked around, opened the lid, and poured the honey in. The sound was off. Looking down, it was all gone. The fruits of its labor had been completely wiped out. The bee was completely furious. It flew straight for the duck. The duck immediately defended himself, but the bee's mind was filled with revenge. The duck quickly modified his defense system. The bee braked frantically, but it was too late. It crashed straight into the cork. The duck looked smug. After breaking free, the bee flew to a cactus, broke off a spine, loaded it, and shot itself out with a bow and arrow. When the duck turned around, he was so scared he ran off on the spot. The power was too brutal. The bee turned and chased. The duck could only dive into a well. Under the bee's overwhelming assault, the duck raised a white flag in surrender. He immediately returned the honey. Only then did the fury subside. But the duck wasn't being honest. He secretly hid one jar. The bee wasn't about to let that slide and threw a javelin directly at him. Only after being hit did the duck reluctantly put down the last jar of honey.